Now that's over and done with. Ladies and gentlemen, the motion for tonight would be this House would support Malaysia's plan to develop nuclear energy. And to begin the grand finals of this year's GEMS WUPID, I invite the Prime Minister, Mr. Doug Cochrane.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. It might seem ironic, but we say that it was a stroke of foresight, which led the Malaysian government recently to announce the commissioning of 2 new nuclear power plants, despite the state already having loads and loads of opportunities in terms of exploiting its own energy reserves in the form of oil and petroleum. What Harish and I will contend on this side of the House is that the fossil fuel age is slowly setting, and that the Malaysian government ought to look, and has been looking, and we applaud its efforts to do so, to alternative sources of energy. I want to make 2 major points in first proposition today. Firstly, to establish the imperative to move away from oil and other fossil fuels, and secondly, to suggest why Malaysia is uniquely well placed to exploit new nuclear technology. So first of all, why does this imperative exist? I should think that much of this analysis will be somewhat obvious. Oil, as we all know, is a finite commodity. Due to run out. Moreover, what we say is that energy security in today's day and age is one of the things that makes nations more powerful and makes their economies more powerful. We don't want a situation in several decades' time where Malaysia finds itself unable to guarantee its own energy security. Moreover, what we say is that nuclear power is the perfect solution to this problem, insofar as uranium itself can be imported from a variety of countries, like Canada, like Australia. Generally speaking, many of these countries having incredibly low risks of political instability. As a result, we think Malaysia's supply lines will be secure if it affects a shift to nuclear power. Secondly, what we'd say is that the imperative is made all the larger by the reality of global warming in our world today. None of us on opposition or government today will deny the reality of global warming or the threat it poses either to global food supplies, either to increased risk of malaria in Africa, as rising temperatures create the swamps in which new mosquitoes can breed, either in terms of international obligations, in terms of Kyoto or Cancun. What we suggest on proposition today is that green movements here and abroad have been short-sighted in trying to move away from nuclear technology. We say they ought to embrace it. Even if nuclear technology carried with it some risks of safety, and Mr. Natarajan will go on to explain why we don't think those risks are anything other than minimal, we suggest they ought to be weighed against the certain destruction of our environment that will come if we carry on burning fossil fuels. Moreover, what we say is that in transport, in mining, at every stage of the production process, oil and fossil fuels are incredibly dangerous to those that harvest them and to the ecosystems from which they are harvested or transported through. I'll take a point.
Australia has tried to discourage Indonesia from developing nuclear power because it believes that its volcanic and earthquake-prone situation makes those stations unsafe. Doesn't that damage the possibility of uranium going to Malaysia or even these stations being viable?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think what's more likely is that in terms of safety risks, they'll do what most other countries have done, which is to export any uranium waste to places with low geological activity. So look at what the United States does in terms of concentrating its nuclear waste in Yucca Mountain in Nevada, a very secure patch of desert, or what Europe's doing in terms of dumping a lot of it in Greenland. We think that Malaysia can take advantage of certain other similar opportunities. Secondly, why is Malaysia uniquely well placed to take advantage of this opportunity? No thanks. What Harish and I would contend for you today is that with industries like nuclear power, with burgeoning new forms of energy, we suggest there's a massive advantage to being a first mover in terms of getting the technology out there, getting other people to follow your lead. As far as possible, we think Malaysia ought to be at the forefront of developing new forms of nuclear technology. The larger the nuclear industry, the greater incentives for moving forward. Further, what we say is that this sort of strategic policy plays to Malaysia's strengths. Universities like the one that we're in right now are producing hundreds and hundreds of qualified engineers who can do things like ensure proper safety regulations, develop new forms of technology, develop new fission and fusion technologies. We say that to win this game, Malaysia has to be in it in the first place. This provides the proper incentives for these engineers and gives them opportunities for training, professional development and employment when they leave university. Moreover, what we say is that governmental involvement here is absolutely essential. The private sector will not solve. If I flick on a light and I get the sort of result I'm expecting in terms of increased luminescence, I don't care what source it comes from generally. Nor do most private consumers even know what source their energy comes from. So if nuclear energy was more expensive in the short term, people wouldn't choose it, companies wouldn't pay for it. We think that moving away from oil is an absolute necessity for all of the reasons I've just shown you in terms of the common harms it creates to our society and to our environment. Government, we think then, has to fill the void created by the market when the market says that nuclear energy is just too expensive. With increased investment, we expect the price of nuclear energy to decline over time, so we suggest this is a viable investment in the future. Moreover, what we say is that for other renewables, like, say, wind power in Japan, tidal power in Scotland, moving forward the frontiers of energy development requires governmental investment, oftentimes just to pay for the insurance for these nuclear power plants, which is incredibly hard to get, and to pay for incredibly high upfront costs at the very beginning. I'll take the closing.
How exactly is Malaysia facing a lack of energy security right now?
Well, the whole point is that we're playing for the long term, right? We think that however much oil Malaysia has, and I'm not going to lie to you and say that I have the figure off the top of my head, we know, however, that that number is less than infinite, and therefore that a long-term strategy is absolutely required. The final point we want to make is that actually in the medium term, however much oil Malaysia has, this actually gives it an opportunity to do something else with its oil, namely to export it. We think that not only makes it more and more of a regional power in terms of the influence it can have over other nations, we think it locks them in. It's often very difficult to redivert supplies of oil once you're buying them from one place. So we think it can lock them into certain buying patterns because they're already buying your oil. Moreover, we say this can help Malaysia's balance of payments in terms of having more goods to export and bring to market, thereby leading to an influx of foreign currency, which can help stabilize the ringgit in any times of trouble that may follow. So what have we told you today on side proposition? We've suggested that the moral imperative is to develop alternative sources of energy as soon as possible. Not just thinking for the short term, but for the long term as well. And what we give to you in the example of Malaysia is a country uniquely suited to seize this opportunity and to make the most of it. That's why we beg to propose. Thank you very much.